is now facing a water crisis as the twin rivers Tigris and Euphrates run dry.
In 2021, a fisherman in Iraq noticed something strange. The water in the Euphrates River was lower than he had ever seen it. His father had fished these waters. His grandfather had fished these waters. For generations, this river has provided life. But now, something was wrong. He walked into the riverbed, something that should have been impossible. The mud beneath his feet had not seen sunlight in centuries, maybe longer. And that's when he saw it. Structures, ancient walls, shapes emerging from the earth, things that had been hidden underwater since before his great-great-grandfather was born. He had no idea what he had just stumbled upon. He had no idea that this moment would make headlines around the world, or that it would send shock waves through churches, mosques, and temples on every continent. Because what the Euphrates is revealing is not just old buildings, it's not just forgotten cities. It's something that was written about over 2,000 years ago, something that marks a very specific moment in human history, a moment that billions of people have been waiting for and dreading it. The Euphrates River is one of the oldest rivers known to mankind. It flows through the land where civilization began. It is mentioned in the very first pages of the Bible, and it is spoken about in Islamic prophecy with terrifying detail. Both texts agree on one thing. When this river dries up, something is about to happen. Something that cannot be stopped. Something that will change everything. And right now, as you watch this, that river is disappearing. Water levels have dropped to historic lows. Entire sections of the riverbed are now exposed. What was meant to stay hidden is coming to the surface. But here's what no one is telling you. What has been found there goes far beyond ancient ruins, far beyond lost artifacts. What has been discovered connects to a prophecy so specific, so chilling, that religious scholars are struggling to explain it away. The question is no longer if this prophecy is real. The question is, what comes next? To understand what is happening right now, we need to go back, way back, to the very beginning. Not the beginning of this story, the beginning of everything. The Euphrates River is not just any river. It is one of the oldest rivers on earth. It has been flowing for thousands upon thousands of years, long before any city was built, long before any nation existed, long before humans wrote their first words. This river was already there. And according to ancient texts, it was there from the start of creation itself. But here's where things get strange. Open the Bible to the very first book, Genesis, the book of beginnings. In chapter 2, something remarkable is written, something that most people overlook. The text describes a garden, a paradise, a place where the first humans walked with God. This garden was called Eden, and flowing through Eden were 4 rivers. One of those rivers was the Euphrates. Let that sink in for a moment. The same river that is drying up today is mentioned in the very first pages of the Bible. The same river where fishermen are finding ancient structures. The same river that is making headlines around the world. It was there at the beginning. And according to prophecy, it will play a role at the end. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. There's much more to uncover first. The Euphrates is not just important to the Bible. It is important to all of human history. Historians call the land around the Euphrates something special. They call it the cradle of civilization. This is where human society began. This is where people first learned to farm. This is where the first cities were built. This is where writing was invented. Everything started here. The river stretches over 1,700 miles. It begins in the mountains of Turkey. It flows through Syria. It winds through Iraq. And it empties into the Persian Gulf. For thousands of years, this river gave life to everyone who lived near it. Empires rose along its banks. Kingdoms flourished because of its waters. Millions of people depended on it for survival. Without the Euphrates, there would be no Babylon, no Assyria, no Mesopotamia. The ancient world as we know it would not exist. But there's something else about this river, something that goes beyond history books. This river has always been seen as sacred. The ancient people who lived near the Euphrates believed it was a gift from the gods. They built temples along its shores. They performed rituals in its waters. They believed the river connected the earth to the heavens. And they were not alone in thinking this. Across different cultures and different religions, the Euphrates held special meaning. It was never just water. It was a symbol, a boundary, a marker of something divine. The Bible mentions the Euphrates by name more than any other river, more than the Nile, more than Jordan. This river appears again and again throughout Scripture, and each time it appears, something significant is happening. In Genesis, it marks the boundary of the land God promised to Abraham. This was the land that would become Israel. The Euphrates was the eastern edge of that promise. But that's not all. In the book of Deuteronomy, God speaks to Moses about this river. He describes it as a great river, a landmark, a border of destiny. In Joshua, the Euphrates is mentioned again as the Israelites prepare to enter the promised land. It represented the furthest reach of God's blessing. But here's what most people miss. The Euphrates is not just mentioned in the beginning books of the Bible. It appears in the prophetic books too. The books that talk about the future. The books that describe the end of days. And what those books say will send chills down your spine. The prophet Jeremiah wrote about the Euphrates. He described a time when great armies would gather near its waters. He spoke of judgment coming to the nations. Isaiah also wrote about this region. He described events that would shake the world, events tied to this very river. But the most terrifying prophecy comes from the book of Revelation. We'll get to that soon. But first, you need to understand something important. The Euphrates is not just a river to the millions of Christians around the world. It is a prophetic marker, a sign, a countdown timer built into Scripture itself. When the Bible talks about the Euphrates, it's talking about more than geography. It's talking about destiny. And for the first time in history, that destiny seems to be unfolding. But Christianity is not the only religion that holds the Euphrates sacred. Islam also speaks of this river, and the prophecies in Islamic tradition are just as specific, just as alarming. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, spoke about the Euphrates over 1,400 years ago. He described a time when the river would dry up. He said it would reveal something hidden beneath its waters, and he gave a terrifying warning about what would happen next. We will explore that prophecy in detail later. But for now, understand this. Two of the world's largest religions both point to this river. Both describe it drying up. Both connect it to the end of days. And both prophecies are thousands of years old. What are the chances that both would be coming true at the exact same time? What are the chances that this is all just coincidence? Some would say slim, others would say impossible. Let's go deeper into the ancient history of this region. The area between the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers was called Mesopotamia. The name means land between the rivers. This land saw the rise and fall of some of the greatest empires in history. Sumer was here, one of the earliest civilizations known to mankind. They invented the wheel. They created the first legal codes. They built ziggurats that reached toward the sky. Akkad was here, the first true empire in history. It conquered lands far and wide. Babylon was here, the mighty city with its hanging gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Assyria was here, a military power so fierce that nations trembled at its name. All of these civilizations depended on the Euphrates. All of them built their lives around its waters, and all of them eventually fell. But the river remained, century after century, empire after empire. The Euphrates kept flowing. It survived wars. It survived conquests. It survived the rise and fall of countless kingdoms. Until now, something has changed. Something that has never happened before in recorded history. The river that witnessed the birth of civilization is dying. The water that sustained empires for thousands of years is vanishing. Satellite images show the difference clearly. Decades ago, the Euphrates was wide and strong. Today, large sections are almost empty. You can walk across parts of the riverbed without getting your ankles wet. Local farmers are devastated. Fishermen have lost their livelihoods. Entire communities that depended on the river for generations are facing an uncertain future. But this is more than an environmental crisis. This is a prophetic event. Think about what we've covered so far. The Euphrates was present at the creation of the world according to Genesis. It flowed through the Garden of Eden. It marked the boundaries of God's promise to Abraham. It was central to the rise of human civilization. Prophets wrote about it. Religious texts revered it. Billions of people around the world see it as sacred. And now, it's disappearing. The very river that was there at the beginning is fading away as we approach what many believe is the end. Is this a coincidence? Is this just climate change and politics and dams? Or is something else happening here? There's an ancient belief that rivers carry memory. That water holds the history of everything it touches. If that's true, then the Euphrates carries the memory of all human history. The first farmers who planted crops along its banks. The first kings who ruled from its cities. The first priests who prayed at its temples. All of that history. All of that memory. All of those secrets. They're being exposed right now. The water is pulling back like a curtain, and what's behind that curtain is shaking the world. Ancient structures nobody knew existed. Artifacts that rewrite history. Locations that match descriptions from religious texts. Each month, something new is found. Each discovery raises more questions than answers. But the biggest question remains: why is this happening now? Some say it's because of Turkish dams upstream. They're holding back the water. They're controlling the flow, and downstream countries are suffering. Some say it's climate change, less rain, less snow in the mountains, higher temperatures drying out the land. Some say it's politics, water wars, nations fighting over a dying resource. All of these explanations are true, partially, but none of them explain the timing. None of them explain why this is happening at the exact moment when other prophetic signs are appearing around the world. None of them explain why ancient texts predicted this exact scenario. The Euphrates River has flowed for thousands of years. It has survived everything history threw at it. But something is different now. Something is changing. And ancient texts from multiple religions say this change would come. They say it would mark a turning point, a shift, a moment when everything begins to accelerate. We've set the stage. We've shown you what this river means. We've revealed why it matters to billions of people across different faiths. Now it's time to look at what's actually happening on the ground. The water levels, the discoveries, the signs that are appearing one after another. What's happening to the Euphrates right now is beyond anything scientists predicted, beyond anything governments expected. And what are they finding beneath those disappearing waters? That's where this story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. Let's talk about what's happening right now. Not thousands of years ago, not in ancient texts, right now, today. As you watch this, the Euphrates River is dying. That's not an exaggeration. That's not fear-mongering. That's what scientists, researchers, and people living along the river are saying with their own words. Water levels have dropped to the lowest point ever recorded. Entire sections of the river have become shallow streams. Some parts have dried up completely, and it's getting worse every single year. To understand how bad things have gotten, we need to look at the numbers, cold, hard facts that cannot be denied. In the 1970s, the Euphrates carried a massive amount of water. Billions of cubic meters flowed through it each year. The river was wide. It was deep. It was powerful. Today, that flow has been cut by more than half. Some reports say the river has lost up to 70% of its water volume. 70%. That's not a small decline. That's a collapse. Satellite images tell the story better than any words can. Pictures from 20 years ago show a wide blue ribbon cutting through the desert. Pictures from today show something very different. Brown, narrow, broken. The mighty Euphrates is becoming a shadow of what it once was. But when did this start? When did the river begin to die? The decline has been gradual. Decade by decade, the water levels dropped. At first, nobody paid much attention. Rivers go through cycles. Droughts come and go. But around 2010, things started to accelerate. The drops became faster. The droughts became longer. Recovery periods became shorter. And then came 2021. That year, something happened that shocked everyone. Water levels plunged to historic lows. Levels that had never been seen in modern times. Levels that revealed things that should have stayed hidden. The river was not just low. It was vanishing. Local residents were the first to notice. Farmers who had worked the land for generations saw their irrigation channels go dry. Fishermen who had fed their families from the river found no fish left to catch. One farmer in Syria described it this way. He said the river used to come up to his chest. Now it barely reaches his knees. His crops are dying. His livestock are thirsty. His future is uncertain. He is not alone. Thousands of families along the Euphrates are facing the same crisis. Villages that have existed for centuries are being abandoned. People are leaving their ancestral homes because there is no water left. But human suffering is only part of the story. What's causing this? Why is the Euphrates disappearing? There are several answers, and none of them are simple. The first major cause is dams. Turkey has built massive dam projects in the upper regions of the river. The largest is called the Ataturk Dam. It's one of the biggest dams in the world. These dams hold back enormous amounts of water. Water that used to flow freely into Syria and Iraq now sits in Turkish reservoirs. Turkey says they need the water for agriculture and electricity. They say they have a right to use their own resources. But downstream, countries are dying of thirst. Syria has lost much of its water supply. Iraq is facing one of the worst water crises in its history. Both nations have accused Turkey of choking off their lifeline. The situation has become so tense that some experts call it a water war. Not with guns and bombs, but with dams and policies. And the river pays the price. But dams are not the only problem. Climate change is making everything worse. Temperatures in the region are rising. Rainfall is decreasing. Snow that used to melt in the mountains and feed the river is no longer falling. The entire weather pattern of the region is shifting, and not in a good way. Droughts that used to happen once every few decades are now happening every few years. Heat waves that used to be rare are now common. The land itself is drying out. Scientists have issued warning after warning. They say the situation will only get worse. They predict that within a few decades, large sections of the Euphrates could disappear entirely, permanently. But here's what's strange, what's almost impossible to explain. Scientists have been tracking climate patterns for years. They've been monitoring the dams. They've been measuring the water levels. None of their models predicted how fast this would happen. The decline is accelerating at a rate that defies expectations. Every year, the river drops faster than the year before. Every drought is worse than the last. It's as if something is speeding up the process, as if the river is racing toward some invisible finish line. And that timing raises serious questions. Remember those prophecies we mentioned? The ones from the Bible and the Quran? They both describe the Euphrates drying up. They both connect it to the end times. And they both suggest that when this happens, it won't be gradual. It won't take centuries. It will happen quickly, suddenly, in a way that catches people off guard. Is that what we're seeing now? Let's look at specific events. Moments that made headlines around the world. In 2021, Iraq declared a state of emergency. Water reserves had dropped to critical levels. Crops were failing across the country. Animals were dying of thirst. The government pleaded with Turkey to release more water. Turkey refused. In 2022, things got even worse. Videos emerged showing parts of the Euphrates that had completely dried up. You could walk across the riverbed without stepping in a single puddle. People shared these videos online. They went viral. Millions watched in disbelief as the ancient river turned to dust. Religious communities saw these videos and reacted immediately. Churches held special prayer meetings. Mosques discussed the prophecies. People around the world began asking the same question. Is this the sign we were warned about? The discoveries started coming faster after that. As water levels dropped, things began to emerge. Things that had been underwater for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. At first it was small stuff, old pottery, broken tools, fragments of ancient life. But then the bigger discoveries started. Entire buildings appeared. Walls that had been submerged for centuries suddenly stood in the open air. Streets from forgotten cities became visible again. Archaeologists rushed to the sites. They had limited time. When the water returned, these treasures would disappear again. If the water returned. One of the most stunning discoveries happened in Iraq. A site called Kemune emerged from the reservoir. It was a Bronze Age city, over 3,400 years old. This city had been built during the time of the Mitanni empires, a powerful kingdom that ruled this region before Babylon rose to power. Nobody knew it was there. For decades, It had been hidden beneath the water. The dam had covered it completely. But now, as the water vanished, the city returned. Researchers found palace walls, storage rooms. Ceramic vessels are still intact after thousands of years. Clay tablets with ancient writing. The discovery made international news. But it also raised an unsettling question. What else is down there? Kemune was not the only site to emerge. Along the entire length of the Euphrates, similar discoveries were being made. Ancient villages, buried temples, forgotten graveyards. Each low water season revealed something new. Each discovery added to the mystery. It was as if the river had been keeping secrets, hiding them for millennia. And now, finally, it was giving them up. But why? Why now? Local legends speak of things buried beneath the Euphrates, things that were meant to stay hidden, things that ancient people deliberately sank beneath the waters. Some of these legends talk about cursed objects. Others mention sealed tombs. A few even describe prisons, places where dangerous things were locked away. For centuries, these were just stories, tales told by grandparents to curious children. But as more sites emerge from the riverbed, some people are starting to wonder. Were those legends more than just stories? Eyewitnesses have reported strange things near the newly exposed areas. Some say the ground in certain spots feels wrong. The soil has an unusual color. The air smells different. Others report finding bones. Not animal bones, human bones, sometimes scattered. Sometimes arranged in ways that don't make sense. One group of researchers discovered a chamber carved into the riverbed. It was sealed with stones. Someone had deliberately closed it off. They haven't opened it yet. They're not sure they want to. Government officials have tried to control the narrative. They say the discoveries are purely archaeological, historical curiosities, nothing more. But their actions tell a different story. Military personnel have been spotted at several sites. Areas have been cordoned off. Researchers have been told to leave. No explanations given. Why would governments send soldiers to protect old ruins? What are they afraid people might find? The local communities have their own theories. Many of them are religious. They've read the prophecies. They know what the ancient texts say about the Euphrates, and they believe they're watching those prophecies come true. One village elder in Iraq put it simply. He said his grandfather told him that one day the river would reveal its secrets. That day, his grandfather said, would mark the beginning of the end. The elder paused after saying this. Then he pointed at the dry riverbed. That day is here, he said. International organizations have issued warnings about the crisis. The United Nations has called the situation a humanitarian disaster. They say millions of people could be displaced. Water shortages could spark conflicts. Entire regions could become uninhabitable. But their warnings focus on the practical problems, the political issues, the environmental concerns. They don't talk about the prophecies. They don't mention the discoveries. They don't ask the deeper questions. Maybe they're afraid to. Something is happening to the Euphrates River. Something unprecedented. Something that matches ancient predictions with frightening accuracy. The water is disappearing faster than anyone expected. Communities are suffering. Governments are scrambling. And beneath the receding waters, secrets that have been buried for thousands of years are coming to light. The drying of the Euphrates is not just an environmental crisis. It's not just a political problem. It's not just an archaeological opportunity. It is something far more significant, something that billions of people around the world have been anticipating and dreading it. We've shown you the facts, the statistics, the images, the eyewitness accounts. But the water disappearing is just the surface of this story. What those ancient prophecies actually say about the Euphrates will change how you see everything we've discussed so far. The Bible dedicates specific passages to this exact event. It describes not just the drying of the river, but what happens after. What is released? What is set in motion? And those words were written 2,000 years ago. What does Revelation say about the Euphrates? What warning did the prophets give about this specific moment in history? The answer is terrifying, and it's exactly what we're going to reveal next. Open your Bible to the last book, the book of Revelation, the book of the Apocalypse. This is where everything we've discussed comes together. This is where the Euphrates River stops being just a river and becomes something much more terrifying. The book of Revelation was written nearly 2,000 years ago. It was written by a man named John. He was exiled on an island called Patmos, and there he received visions. Visions of the future, visions of the end times, visions of events that would shake the world. And in those visions, the Euphrates River plays a central role, not once, but twice. Let's start with the first mention, Revelation chapter 9, verse 14. In this passage, John describes a terrifying scene. 6 angels have sounded their trumpets. Each trumpet brought a new wave of judgment upon the earth. Then the 6th angel sounds his trumpet, and a voice speaks. It comes from the golden altar before God. The voice gives a command that changes everything. Release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. Read that again. 4 angels, bound, at the Euphrates, not stationed there, not visiting there, bound there, trapped, held in place. For how long? The text gives us an answer that will make your blood run cold. Revelation 9:15 says these 4 angels were prepared for a specific hour, a specific day, a specific month, a specific year. They have been waiting, bound at the Euphrates, for one exact moment in time. And what happens when they're released? The Bible says they will kill 1/3 of mankind. 1/3. That's billions of people. These are not ordinary angels. These are beings of immense power, beings so dangerous that God Himself bound them at this specific river, beings that have been waiting for their appointed time. And according to this prophecy, when the Euphrates is affected, these beings will be set loose. Now think about what we covered earlier. The river is drying up for the first time in recorded history. Is this the event that begins the release? Is the water that has kept these beings bound starting to fail? Some scholars say yes. They believe the drying of the Euphrates is the first step, the beginning of the process that will ultimately release whatever is bound there. Others say we're not there yet, that more must happen first. But everyone agrees on one thing. Something is bound at the Euphrates, and it will not stay bound forever. But that's not the only prophecy about the Euphrates in Revelation. Let's turn to chapter 16. This chapter describes the 7 bowls of God's wrath. 7 final judgments poured out upon the earth. Each bowl brings devastation, painful sores, seas turning to blood, rivers become undrinkable, scorching heat from the sun. And then comes the 6th bowl. Revelation 16:12. Listen to these words carefully. The 6th angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east. There it is, written 2,000 years ago. The Euphrates River, dried up, not damaged, not reduced, dried up. And it happens for a specific purpose, to prepare the way, for kings from the east. Who are these kings from the east? Scholars have debated this for centuries. Some say it refers to ancient Persia. Others point to China or other Asian nations. Some believe it represents a coalition of Eastern powers. But the identity matters less than the purpose. These kings are coming for war, the greatest war in human history. A war that the Bible calls by a specific name, Armageddon. The very next verses in Revelation 16 describe what happens after the Euphrates dries up. Demonic spirits go out to the kings of the whole world. They perform signs and wonders. They deceive the nations, and they gather them for battle. The battle on the great day of God Almighty. The location, a place called Armageddon. In Hebrew, Har Megiddo, a real place in modern-day Israel. And it all begins with the drying of the Euphrates. Let's step back for a moment. Let's look at the bigger picture. The book of Revelation describes a sequence of events. Seals are opened. Trumpets are sounded. Bowls are poured out. Each brings the world closer to the final confrontation. The Euphrates appears in both the trumpet judgments and the bowl judgments. This river is not a minor detail. It is a major marker in the prophetic timeline. When the Euphrates is affected, something significant is happening. The clock is moving forward. Events are accelerating. And according to many scholars, we are watching this happen right now. But Revelation is not the only book that mentions the Euphrates in prophetic terms. The prophet Jeremiah wrote about this river centuries before John had his visions, and his words are just as chilling. In Jeremiah chapter 46, the prophet describes judgment coming to the nations near the Euphrates. He speaks of a great slaughter, a day of vengeance, a sword that will devour. The imagery is violent, disturbing, apocalyptic. And it centers on the Euphrates River. Jeremiah chapter 51 goes even further. This chapter describes the fall of Babylon, the great city that sat upon the Euphrates, the city that represented human pride and rebellion against God. The prophecy says Babylon will be destroyed. Its waters will be dried up. Its land will become a desolation. Sound familiar? Ancient Babylon sat exactly where the Euphrates is drying up today. The ruins of that great city are in modern Iraq, right along the banks of the disappearing river. Some scholars see this as a double fulfillment. Babylon fell to the Persians in 539 BC. That was the first fulfillment. But the book of Revelation speaks of Babylon again, a future Babylon, a spiritual Babylon, a system that will fall in the last days. And once again, the Euphrates is connected to its destruction. Isaiah also wrote about this region. In Isaiah chapter 11, he describes a time when God will dry up the tongue of the Egyptian sea. He will wave his hand over the Euphrates and split it into 7 streams. Some say this already happened. Others believe it points to a future event, an event connected to the restoration of Israel. Either way, the prophets consistently returned to the Euphrates. They saw it as a key location, a place where important events would unfold. The book of Daniel adds another layer to this mystery. Daniel served in Babylon, right there along the Euphrates. He received visions of the future that matched what Revelation would later describe. He saw kingdoms rise and fall. He saw a final kingdom that would never be destroyed. And he saw events that would mark the end of the age. Daniel was told to seal up his visions. They were not for his time. They were for a future generation. Many believe that generation is alive today. Let's connect these prophecies to what we're seeing now. The Euphrates is drying up. Check. Ancient sites are being revealed. Check. Tensions are rising in the region. Check. Nations are positioning themselves for conflict. Check. The pieces are falling into place, one by one, exactly as the ancient texts described. But there's something else in these prophecies that most people miss. The Bible doesn't just describe the Euphrates drying up. It describes what is revealed when the water disappears. In Revelation 9, it's the four bound angels, beings of tremendous power, waiting to be released. But some scholars believe there's more: hidden references, coded language, secrets embedded in the text. They point to passages that describe creatures emerging. Armies appear. Things that were sealed away suddenly became visible. Is the drying river meant to expose something? Something that was deliberately hidden under the water? Think about what we've already covered. Ancient structures are appearing. Sealed chambers discovered. Bones found in strange arrangements. Sites that governments are suddenly protecting with military force. What if the prophecies aren't just symbolic? What if they're describing real physical things that would be revealed when the river dried? What if those four bound angels aren't just spiritual beings, but also represent something physical? Something buried? Something trapped? Something that the ancient world knew was too dangerous to leave exposed. The ancient Babylonians practiced dark rituals. They worshipped gods that the Bible calls demons. They built temples to entities that demanded blood sacrifices. When Babylon fell, what happened to those worship sites? What happened to the objects used in those rituals? What happened to the things they summoned? Some historians believe they were buried, hidden, sunk beneath the waters of the Euphrates so they could never be found again. Until now. This theory is controversial. Many scholars reject it completely. They say the prophecies are purely symbolic, spiritual in nature. But others aren't so sure. The Bible often operates on multiple levels: literal and symbolic, physical and spiritual. What if the Euphrates prophecies work the same way? What if the drying of the river is both a real event and a spiritual sign? What if what's being revealed is both archaeological and supernatural? Let's talk about the timeline. Many Christians believe we are living in the last days. They point to signs that Jesus described in Matthew 24. Wars and rumors of wars. Earthquakes in various places. Famines and pestilences. They point to the restoration of Israel in 1948, a generation that would not pass away before all things were fulfilled. They point to technology that allows the entire world to witness events simultaneously, something impossible until our generation. And now they point to the Euphrates. The drying of this river fits perfectly into the end times timeline. It connects to the trumpet judgments. It connects to the bowl judgments. It connects to the gathering of armies for Armageddon. If the prophecies are unfolding in order, then the drying of the Euphrates marks a significant milestone, a point of no return. We may be closer to the end than anyone realizes, but not everyone agrees on the interpretation. Some scholars say the Euphrates prophecy was fulfilled in ancient times. They point to moments when the river ran low or was diverted. Others say it's still the future, that what we're seeing now is just a preview, a shadow of what's to come. And others say it's happening right now, in real time, before our eyes. What everyone agrees on is this: the prophecy exists. The river is drying, and the timing is remarkable. The book of Revelation gives another crucial detail. After the Euphrates dries up and the kings of the east prepare for war, something else happens. The seventh bowl is poured out. A voice from the throne of God says, "It is done." The greatest earthquake in history strikes. Cities fall. Islands disappear. Mountains crumble. 100-pound hailstones fall from the sky. This is the finale, the conclusion, the end of the world as we know it. And it all follows the drying of the Euphrates. Let's pause here. Let's consider what we've learned. The Bible mentions the Euphrates in connection with bound angels waiting to be released. It describes the river drying up to prepare for the kings of the east. It connects this event to Armageddon and the final judgments of God. The prophets Jeremiah, Isaiah, and Daniel all wrote about this region. They described destruction, warfare, and supernatural events. For 2,000 years, these were just words on a page. Predictions about a distant future. Mysteries that no one could fully understand. But now, the river is actually drying. Ancient sites are actually emerging. The world is actually changing in ways that match the biblical descriptions. Some will say this is a coincidence. Natural cycles, climate change, political decisions. Others will see it differently. They will see the hand of God moving. They will see prophecy transforming into history. They will see the signs that Jesus told his followers to watch for. Which interpretation is correct? Perhaps the answer depends on what happens next. We've spent a long time examining the biblical prophecies. We've looked at Revelation, Jeremiah, Isaiah, and Daniel. We've connected ancient words to modern events. But here's what might surprise you. Christianity is not the only religion that predicted the drying of the Euphrates. Christians are not the only ones watching this river with fearful anticipation. Across the world, over 1 billion Muslims are also watching. They're reading their own ancient texts. They're seeing the same events unfold. And their prophecies are just as specific, just as detailed, just as terrifying. In fact, the Islamic prophecy about the Euphrates contains a warning so disturbing that it has kept believers awake at night for over 1,000 years. A warning about gold, about death, about a trap that will kill nearly everyone who falls for it. Christians are not the only ones who saw this coming. And what Islam predicts happens after the river dries up might be even more frightening than what we've already discussed. Over 1,400 years ago, a man spoke words that would echo through the centuries. His name was Muhammad. To over 1 billion Muslims around the world, he is the final prophet, the messenger of God, the one who received divine revelation. And among his many prophecies, one stands out, one that sends chills through anyone who hears it. A prophecy about the Euphrates River, about gold, and about death on a scale almost impossible to imagine. The prophecy was recorded by his closest followers. It was written down in the most trusted collections of his sayings, collections called hadith. Two of the most authentic hadith collections are Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. These are considered reliable by Islamic scholars across all branches of Islam, and both of them contain the same prophecy about the Euphrates. The exact words vary slightly between collections. But the core message is identical, terrifying, unmistakable. Here is what the Prophet Muhammad said: "The hour will not come until the Euphrates uncovers a mountain of gold, for which people will fight. 99 out of every 100 will die. and every man among them will say, "Perhaps I will be the one who survives." Read that again, slowly. The Euphrates will uncover a mountain of gold. People will fight over it. 99 out of every 100 will die. Let's break down what this means. First, the prophecy begins with a time marker. The hour will not come until... In Islamic theology, the hour refers to the day of judgment, the end of the world, the moment when all of creation will be judged by God. So this prophecy is specifically about the end times. It describes an event that will happen before the final day arrives, an event involving the Euphrates River. The prophecy says the river will uncover something, not create something, not produce something. Uncover. That means something is already there, hidden, buried, beneath the water or beneath the riverbed. And what is hidden there? Gold. Not a small amount, not a few coins or bars. A mountain of gold. The word mountain is important. It suggests an enormous quantity. More gold than anyone has ever seen. More wealth than nations possess. Some scholars interpret this literally. A physical mountain made of gold or filled with gold deposits. Others see it as symbolic. They say it represents resources, oil, natural gas, strategic materials. But the prophecy is clear. Whatever is revealed, it will be valuable enough to drive people mad with greed. And that's where the horror begins. The prophecy doesn't say people will share this gold peacefully. It doesn't say governments will negotiate calmly. It doesn't say the world will come together. It says people will fight. War, conflict, violence, and the death toll will be catastrophic. 99 out of every 100 will die. Think about that number. If 100 people go to claim this gold, only one will survive. That's a 99% death rate. If 1,000 people go, only 10 survive. If 1,000,000 people go, only 10,000 survive. The prophecy describes a slaughter so massive that almost no one escapes. But here's the truly terrifying part. The prophecy says that every person involved will think they'll be the one to survive. Every single one believes they'll be the lucky one, the smart one, the strong one. They watch others die around them. They see the bodies piling up. They witness the carnage. And still they think, I will make it. I will get the gold. I will be different. That's not just a prophecy. That's a psychological warning about human greed. Islamic scholars have studied this hadith for over 1,000 years. They've debated its meaning. They've discussed when it might happen. They've warned believers to stay away when it does. The Prophet Muhammad himself gave a direct command about this gold. In some versions of the hadith he said, "Whoever is present at that time should not take anything from it." A clear warning. Don't touch it. Don't go near it. Don't let greed override wisdom, because those who do will almost certainly die. So when will this happen? What signs indicate that the uncovering is near? Islamic eschatology describes a series of events that will occur before the day of judgment. These are called the signs of the hour. Some are minor signs: wars, moral decay, natural disasters. These have been happening throughout history, but some are major signs. Specific, undeniable events that mark the final countdown. The uncovering of the Euphrates is listed among these signs. Other major signs include the appearance of the Mahdi, a righteous leader, the return of Jesus, who Muslims believe will come back to fight the Antichrist. The sun is rising from the west, a great smoke covering the earth. Each sign builds upon the previous. Each brings the world closer to the end, and the Euphrates prophecy connects to several of these signs. Some Islamic scholars link the Gold Mountain to global conflict. They say the fighting over this treasure will involve many nations. It could spark a world war. Others connect it to the arrival of the Mahdi. They believe the chaos caused by the gold discovery will create conditions for his appearance. Still others see it as a test, a final temptation, a way for God to separate the greedy from the righteous. Whatever the interpretation, the message is clear. When the Euphrates reveals its treasure, humanity faces a moment of crisis. Now let's connect this to what's happening today. The Euphrates is drying up. Water levels are dropping every year. The riverbed is becoming exposed. If the prophecy is true, if there really is something valuable hidden there, it would start to become visible right about now. Has anything been found? Any gold? Any treasure? Officially, no. No government has announced the discovery of a gold mountain. No news outlet has reported massive treasure deposits. But absence of public announcement doesn't mean absence of discovery. Remember what we discussed earlier: military personnel at excavation sites, areas being cordoned off, researchers being told to leave. What are they protecting? What don't they want people to see? If something valuable has been found, would governments announce it immediately? Or would they try to secure it quietly first? And if the prophecy is correct, their attempts to control it won't matter. Eventually, word will get out, people will come, and the fighting will begin. Some Muslims living near the Euphrates have reported strange activity. Increased security in certain areas, equipment being brought in at night, drilling operations that aren't explained. These are just rumors, unconfirmed reports. But they persist. One Iraqi local claimed he saw trucks removing something from a newly exposed area of the riverbed. He said the site was heavily guarded. He said they worked quickly. He said they left before dawn. What were they taking? He doesn't know. He wasn't allowed close enough to see. Let's consider another angle. What if the gold isn't literal? What if the mountain of gold represents something else? Iraq sits on some of the largest oil reserves in the world. Natural gas deposits, rare earth minerals. As the Euphrates dries up, previously inaccessible areas become available. New resources can be extracted. New wealth can be claimed. Could this be the treasure the prophecy refers to? Some modern Islamic scholars think so. They argue that ancient people understood wealth in terms of gold. But today, we know that oil is more valuable. Energy is the real treasure. If the drying Euphrates exposes new oil fields or makes existing fields easier to access, nations would absolutely fight over them. We've seen this before. Wars in the Middle East have been fought over oil for decades. The region is already unstable, already violent. Add a massive new resource discovery to the mix, and conflict is inevitable. But others insist the prophecy means actual gold. They point out that the prophet's words were specific. He didn't say oil. He didn't say resources. He said gold. And in recent years, there have been interesting geological surveys in the region. Studies have shown that the area around the Euphrates contains mineral deposits that have never been fully explored. The river itself carries sediments from mountains upstream, mountains that may contain precious metals. If the water level drops enough, if the riverbed is fully exposed, what might be found there? There's another element to consider. Ancient civilizations accumulated enormous wealth. The Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Persians. Where did all that treasure go? Some were looted, some were scattered. But ancient texts speak of hidden vaults. secret chambers, royal treasures buried to keep them from invaders. What if some of that ancient gold is still there, buried beneath the Euphrates, waiting to be uncovered? Archaeological evidence shows that ancient people often hid valuables in rivers. They considered water a sacred protector, a barrier against thieves. As long as the water flowed, the treasure stayed hidden. But when the water disappears, the prophecy includes another chilling detail that often gets overlooked. It describes people fighting over the gold. But it doesn't say they fight with ancient weapons. It doesn't specify swords or spears. The fighting will happen in the time before the hour. The end times. Our era. That means modern weapons, guns, bombs, maybe even nuclear weapons. A conflict over the Euphrates treasure could escalate into something far beyond a regional dispute. It could pull in superpowers. It could trigger alliances. It could spiral out of control. And with modern weapons, a 99% death rate becomes horrifyingly plausible. Islamic preachers around the world have begun referencing this hadith more frequently, especially in the last few years. They see the drying river. They see the tensions rising. They see nations positioning themselves in the region. Many are warning their communities. Stay away from the Euphrates. Don't be tempted by whatever is found there. Remember the prophecy. But will people listen? The hadith itself suggests they won't. It says every person will think they'll survive. Everyone believes they're the exception. Human nature hasn't changed in 1,400 years. There's a companion hadith that adds another layer to this prophecy. In it, the Prophet Muhammad describes other signs that will accompany the end times. He mentions earthquakes, famines, plagues, moral corruption, the breakdown of family structures. He describes a time when knowledge will decrease and ignorance will spread, when people will care more about appearances than substance, when the poor will compete in constructing tall buildings. Look around. Do any of these signs sound familiar? The Euphrates prophecy doesn't stand alone. It's part of a larger pattern, a sequence of events that Islamic tradition says will mark the approach of the Day of Judgment. And according to many Muslim scholars, we are living through those events right now. The pieces are in place. The signs are appearing. The timeline is converging. Let's go back to the core question. Is the Euphrates prophecy being fulfilled right now? Is this the moment Muhammad warned about 1,400 years ago? We know the river is drying. That part is undeniable. We know tensions in the region are high. Wars have already been fought there. More conflicts are brewing. We know that discoveries are being made as water levels drop. Ancient sites, hidden chambers, unexplained findings. What we don't know yet is whether the treasure has been found, whether the mountain of gold exists, whether the fighting is about to begin. But here's what we do know. If the Islamic prophecy is correct, the treasure will be found. People will fight over it. Millions will die. And it will all happen in the generation that sees the Euphrates dry up. This generation. Our generation. Both Christianity and Islam predicted the drying of the Euphrates. Both connected it to the end times. Both described events that would follow. The chances of both religions independently predicting the same specific event are astronomically small. Unless they weren't predicting, unless they were revealing, unless they were warning about something real, something that was always going to happen, something that can't be stopped. We've covered the religious prophecies, biblical and Islamic, ancient words describing modern events with disturbing accuracy. But what does science say about all this? What do researchers and experts think about the Euphrates crisis? Do their findings support the prophecies? Do their warnings align with the ancient texts? Or do they offer a different explanation? A rational, secular understanding of what's happening? The answer might surprise you, because when you look at the data, when you examine the evidence, when you listen to what scientists are actually saying about the Euphrates, the prophecies start to sound less like religious fantasy and more like documentary prediction. Let's step away from ancient texts for a moment. Let's look at what modern science says about the Euphrates. Because here's the thing, scientists don't read prophecies. They don't base their research on religious texts. They study data. They analyze facts. They measure reality. And what they're finding is terrifying, not because it contradicts the prophecies, but because it confirms them. The United Nations published a report in 2022. The title was direct, blunt, alarming. Unprecedented water crisis in the Euphrates-Tigris basin. The report detailed water loss across the entire river system. The numbers were staggering. In some areas, water availability had dropped by more than 70%. 70% in just a few decades. The UN called it a crisis that threatens the entire region. Millions of people face water shortages. Agriculture is collapsing. Ecosystems are dying. But the report said something else. Something even more disturbing. The decline is accelerating. What does that mean? It means the river isn't just getting lower. It's getting lower faster each year. Scientists expected gradual decline. They predicted changes over generations. They thought communities would have time to adapt. They were wrong. The Euphrates is disappearing at a rate that defies their models. Climate predictions didn't account for this speed. Water management strategies can't keep up. Something is happening that science didn't anticipate. Dr. Nadir Al-Ansari is a professor of water resources engineering. He has studied the Euphrates for decades. He has published countless papers on the river's condition. In a 2021 interview, he said something chilling. If current trends continue, major portions of the Euphrates could be completely dry within 20 years, maybe less. 20 years. One generation. He continued, "We are witnessing something unprecedented. The speed of decline suggests factors we may not fully understand." Factors we may not fully understand. What factors? What is science missing? Let's look at the hard data, the measurements that cannot be disputed. Satellite imagery from NASA shows the transformation clearly. Images from 1999 show a wide, healthy river. Images from 2023 show something completely different. The river has narrowed by more than half in some sections. Reservoirs that used to be full are now mostly empty. Lake Assad in Syria has lost enormous amounts of water. You can see the difference from space. The change is that dramatic. But satellites don't just take pictures. They also measure water volume. They calculate flow rates. They track changes over time. And the data is damning. The Euphrates once carried about 30 billion cubic meters of water per year. That was the average flow for centuries. Today, the flow is estimated at less than 10 billion cubic meters. Some years, it's even lower. The river has lost 2/3 of its water in just 50 years. 50 years. Less than a human lifetime. For a river that has flowed for thousands of years, this decline is not gradual. It's catastrophic. Scientists point to multiple causes. We've mentioned some already. Dams in Turkey, climate change, reduced rainfall. But let's dig deeper into each factor. Turkey's dam projects began in the 1970s. The Southeast Anatolia project, called GAP in Turkish, includes 22 dams and 19 hydroelectric plants. The largest is the Ataturk Dam. It was completed in 1990. It created a massive reservoir that holds more water than some countries use in a year. All that water used to flow downstream to Syria and Iraq. Now it sits behind Turkish dams. Turkey argues they have a right to use water from their own territory. Syria and Iraq argue that Turkey is choking them. The dispute has brought the nations to the brink of war multiple times. But dams alone don't explain the full decline. Climate change is making everything worse. The entire Middle East is getting hotter. Rainfall patterns are shifting. Snow that used to feed the river is melting faster or not falling at all. A study published in the journal Nature Climate Change analyzed temperature data across the region. The findings were stark. The Euphrates-Tigris basin is warming faster than almost anywhere else on Earth. Temperatures have risen by nearly 2 degrees Celsius in the last century. That might not sound like much, but it's enough to completely alter the water cycle. Evaporation rates have skyrocketed. Water that used to stay in the river now evaporates into the air. Soil that used to hold moisture now bakes dry. Droughts that used to happen once every 20 years now happen every 3 to 5 years. And each drought is more severe than the last. Scientists call this a doom loop. Less water leads to higher temperatures. Higher temperatures lead to more evaporation. More evaporation leads to less water. The cycle feeds itself, and it's accelerating. But here's where science starts to sound like prophecy. Researchers have created computer models to predict the future of the Euphrates. They input current data. They factor in climate trends. They account for population growth and water usage. The models all show the same thing. Complete collapse is coming. Not in centuries. Not in generations. In years. One model from the University of Baghdad predicted that the Euphrates could be reduced to isolated pools by 2040. Less than 2 decades from now. Another study from MIT suggested that by 2050, the river might cease to function as a connected waterway. These aren't religious prophets speaking. These are scientists, engineers, academics. And they're describing the same outcome the ancient texts predicted. The World Bank issued a report in 2022 titled Ominous Waters. The report analyzed water stress across the Middle East. One section focused specifically on the Euphrates. The language was unusually direct for a technical document. The Euphrates River's system is approaching complete failure. The consequences will be devastating and irreversible. Devastating and irreversible. The report predicted mass migration. Hundreds of thousands of people were forced to leave their homes. Agricultural collapse, food shortages, economic devastation, and conflict. The report specifically warned that water scarcity would lead to violence, countries fighting over what little remains, communities turning against each other, a region already unstable, becoming a war zone. Sound familiar? Let's talk about what scientists have found on the ground, in the exposed riverbed, in the dried-up sections. Geological surveys have revealed something unexpected. The soil beneath the Euphrates is not normal river sediment. In several locations, researchers have found clay layers that shouldn't be there, rock formations that don't match the surrounding geology. These anomalies suggest something was deliberately placed or built beneath the river. Structures that predate recorded history, One team from the University of Mosul discovered what appears to be a man-made channel carved into bedrock. It's covered by centuries of sediment, but it's clearly artificial. Why would ancient people carve channels beneath a river? What were they trying to hide or contain? Environmental scientists have also noticed something strange. In areas where the water has recently receded, plant life is struggling to grow back. Normally, when a riverbed dries, vegetation returns quickly. Seeds sprout, grasses spread, nature reclaims space. But in parts of the Euphrates, nothing grows. The soil appears dead, contaminated, almost sterile. Tests have been conducted. The results are puzzling. No obvious pollution, no clear toxins, just soil that refuses to support life. One researcher described it as biologically null, as if something has drained the life force from the earth itself. Seismic studies add another layer of mystery. Teams have used ground-penetrating radar to scan beneath the riverbed. The technology allows them to see underground without digging. They've found voids, empty spaces, chambers that appear hollow. Some are natural, caves formed by water erosion over millennia. But others are too regular, too symmetrical, too deliberately shaped. These look like rooms, halls, constructed spaces. What lies inside them? Who built them? When and why beneath the river? The researchers don't have answers yet, but they're asking the same questions religious scholars have asked for centuries. Marine biologists have documented the collapse of the river's ecosystem. Fish populations have crashed. Species that lived in the Euphrates for thousands of years are disappearing. But before they disappeared, something odd happened. Fishermen reported strange behavior. Fish swimming in circles, gathering in unusual patterns, moving toward areas they normally avoid. Some described it as panic. As if the fish knew something was wrong, as if they sensed something coming. By 2022, most of the fish were gone. The river that once sustained millions now barely supports life. Atmospheric scientists have noticed changes too. Weather patterns around the Euphrates have become erratic. Sudden temperature spikes, unexpected windstorms, dust clouds that appear without warning. One meteorologist in Iraq documented over 40 unusual weather events near the river in a single year. Events that have no clear scientific explanation. He stopped publishing his findings after government officials told him to. Why? What don't they want people to know? International water experts have tried to intervene. They've proposed solutions, dam agreements, water-sharing treaties, climate adaptation strategies. None of them are working. Turkey continues to hold water. Syria and Iraq continue to suffer. And the river continues to die. At a 2023 Water Security Conference, one expert said something remarkable. It's as if the river has a will of its own, as if it wants to dry up. Every solution we propose fails. Every plan falls apart. We're not just fighting politics or climate. We're fighting something else. Something else? What did he mean by that? Let's connect all these scientific findings. The river is drying faster than models predict. The soil beneath it contains anomalies. Structures are appearing that shouldn't exist. The ecosystem is collapsing in unusual ways. Weather patterns are becoming chaotic. Every solution fails. Every intervention falls short. The decline cannot be stopped. Science has documented all of this. I measured it, prove it, published it. But science cannot explain why it's happening so fast. Why solutions fail. Why is the timing so perfect? Unless the ancient prophecies weren't just spiritual insights, unless they were literal predictions about real events, unless what's happening to the Euphrates right now was always meant to happen, written into the fabric of history itself. The evidence is overwhelming. The data is clear. The trends are undeniable. The Euphrates River is dying, and when it dies completely, something will be revealed. Scientists are documenting physical reality, the measurements, the changes, the discoveries. But they're not prepared for what those discoveries actually mean. They're not prepared for what lies beneath the water, for what has been hidden there for thousands of years. They're not prepared for the moment when the prophecies stop being predictions and start being history. The science confirms what's happening. The data supports the timeline. The evidence validates the warnings. But nothing prepared researchers for what they found beneath the water. Discoveries so shocking that they've been kept from the public. Findings so disturbing that governments have classified them. Objects so strange that scientists struggle to explain them. What was buried beneath the Euphrates? What has the disappearing water exposed? The answer will change everything you think you know about ancient history, about human civilization, about what's really been hidden from us all along. Summer of 2022. The water level in the Mosul Dam reservoir dropped to its lowest point in decades. And that's when they saw it. Rising from the mud like a ghost from the past. Walls, buildings, an entire city that had been underwater for over 40 years. The city of Kemune, a Bronze Age settlement over 400 years old. But here's what makes this discovery different from every other archaeological find in history. This city wasn't supposed to exist. No ancient text mentioned it. No map showed its location. No legend spoke of a city in this exact spot. It appeared as if from nowhere, preserved perfectly beneath the water, waiting. The first archaeologist to examine the site stood in silence for nearly 10 minutes, just staring. Later, she said she felt like she was trespassing, like she had walked into a place that was meant to stay hidden. The feeling never left her. The team worked quickly. They knew the water could return at any time. They had weeks, maybe months, to document everything. What they found stunned the academic world. The city was massive, much larger than initial estimates suggested. Buildings stretched across several acres. Streets were laid out in organized patterns. This wasn't a village. This was a major urban center. But it dated to a time when cities this size weren't supposed to exist in this region. Whoever built Kemune had knowledge, resources, power. And then they vanished. Inside the buildings, researchers found pottery, not broken fragments, complete vessels, still intact after thousands of years underwater. They found cuneiform tablets, ancient writing that hasn't been fully translated yet. The tablets were sealed in clay jars, protected from the water. What do they say? Scholars are still working on the translation. But early readings suggest something unexpected. The tablets mention a warning, a seal, a deliberate act to hide something. One researcher who examined the tablets said the language felt urgent, desperate, as if whoever wrote them was running out of time. But the tablets weren't the strangest discovery. Deep inside one of the larger buildings, the team found a chamber. The entrance was sealed with stones, not casually blocked, deliberately sealed. Someone wanted to make sure whatever was inside stayed inside. The team debated for days. Should they open it? Should they leave it sealed? Eventually, Curiosity 1. They removed the stones carefully, one by one. The air that escaped from the chamber was cold, unnaturally cold. One team member said it smelled wrong, not like decay or mold, something else, something chemical, almost metallic. Inside the chamber, they found objects arranged in a circle, clay figurines, small statues, each one facing inward. Facing what? The center of the circle was empty, just bare floor. But the arrangement suggested something had been there, something the figurines were watching or guarding. Whatever it was, someone had removed it long ago, or it had removed itself. News of Kemune spread quickly. Academic journals published articles. Documentaries were planned. The discovery was called one of the most important archaeological finds of the decade. But within months, access to the site was restricted. Military personnel appeared. Researchers were told their permits were revoked. The official reason? Safety concerns, structural instability. But locals reported seeing trucks at the site, equipment being moved in. Digging continued long after the archaeologists left. What were they looking for? What did they find? The government has not answered these questions. Kemune was not the only discovery. All along the Euphrates, as water levels dropped, new sites appeared. In Syria, a village emerged that dated back over 5,000 years. The preservation was remarkable. Tools still sat where they had been placed. Bowls still rested on ancient tables. It was as if the people had left suddenly, in a hurry, abandoning everything. One building in the village contained something disturbing. Bones. Human bones. Dozens of them, all piled in a single room. The arrangement was not random. The bodies had been placed deliberately, positioned in specific ways. Carbon dating showed they all died at the same time. Suddenly, violently. But there were no weapons marks, no signs of battle, no evidence of disease. Whatever killed them left no trace. In Iraq, near the ancient city of Babylon, fishermen found something in the exposed riverbed. A stone structure, rectangular, carved with symbols that no one recognized. The stone was not from the region. Geological analysis showed it came from somewhere else, possibly hundreds of miles away. Why would someone transport a massive stone that far? And why bury it in the river? The symbols carved into it have puzzled experts. They don't match Babylonian script. They don't match any known ancient language. One linguist suggested they might not be language at all. They might be something else. Diagrams, coordinates, instructions. Instructions for what? But perhaps the most disturbing discovery came from a location that authorities won't disclose. In 2023, a team of geologists was surveying the riverbed. They were using ground-penetrating radar to map underground features. The radar showed an anomaly. A large void, deep beneath the riverbed. The void was too regular to be natural, too perfect. It was a chamber, and it was enormous. The team reported their findings. They recommended excavation. They wanted to know what was down there. Their recommendation was denied. The site was sealed. The team was disbanded. One member of that team spoke anonymously to a journalist. He said the chamber wasn't empty. The radar showed something inside, something dense, something metallic. And here's the part that kept him awake at night. The readings showed movement. Let's talk about what locals have been finding. Not archaeologists, not researchers, regular people, farmers, fishermen, children playing near the water. They've found coins, ancient currency from empires long gone. Some of the coins depict rulers that history books don't mention. They found jewelry, gold, silver, precious stones, crafted with techniques that shouldn't have existed in ancient times. They've found weapons, swords with blades that haven't rusted despite being underwater for centuries. Spear points made from materials that modern metallurgists can't identify. One farmer found a small box, made of stone, sealed tight. He tried to open it. Couldn't. He tried to break it. Wouldn't break. He took it to a local museum. The curator examined it, tested it. I tried every method to open it. Nothing worked. The box remains sealed, sitting in storage, waiting. There are reports of tunnels, underground passages revealed by the receding water. Some appear to be ancient irrigation systems, water channels carved by long-dead engineers. But others are different. They don't follow logical patterns. They don't seem to have practical purposes. They descend deep into the earth, deeper than makes sense for water management, deeper than ancient people should have been able to dig. Where do they lead? No one knows. No one has been allowed to explore them fully. But people who live near the tunnel entrances report sounds. At night, when the wind is still, sounds coming from underground, like voices, like movement, like something down there is waking up. Let's examine the artifacts more closely. The objects that have been recovered and documented, many of them show a level of sophistication that doesn't match the time period. Ancient people with primitive tools shouldn't have been able to create these things. There are clay tablets with mathematical equations, advanced geometry, astronomical calculations that require understanding of planetary movements. There are medical instruments, surgical tools, designed with precision that rivals modern equipment. There are optical devices, carved crystal lenses, ground and polished to exact specifications. How did they make these? How did they even know to make these? Some artifacts contain writing in multiple languages, not translations, parallel texts, as if whoever created them wanted to make sure the message survived. The languages include Sumerian, Akkadian, Ancient Hebrew, and others that haven't been identified. The messages vary. Some are records, trade agreements, building instructions, but some are warnings. Do not disturb. Sealed for protection. Death to those who open. Standard curses for ancient tombs, perhaps, or perhaps something more literal. One artifact stands out among all the others. A clay cylinder, about 8 inches long, covered in cuneiform writing, found in the ruins of Kemune. The cylinder describes a ritual, a ceremony performed by priests of an ancient god, a god whose name appears nowhere else in historical records. The ritual involved the river, specifically the Euphrates. The priests would throw offerings into the water, objects meant to appease the god. But the cylinder describes something else. It says the priests weren't just giving offerings, they were feeding something, something that lived in the river, something that demanded tribute. And if the tribute stopped, the cylinder says the creature would break free. The ritual ended over 3,000 years ago. Are these just myths? Ancient superstitions? Stories meant to scare or control? Maybe. Probably. But then, why are so many artifacts related to the river itself? Why do so many texts mention things hidden in the water? Why did ancient people seem obsessed with keeping the Euphrates flowing? It's as if they knew, as if they understood that the river wasn't just water. It was a barrier, a seal, a prison, and as long as it flowed, whatever it held would remain contained. Let's talk about the structures that are appearing. the buildings and monuments rising from the mud. Archaeologists have identified temples, places of worship dedicated to gods that ruled this region thousands of years ago. Marduk, Ishtar, Enlil, names from ancient mythology, beings that people once believed controlled the world. The temples are elaborate, decorated with carvings, statues, altars where sacrifices were performed. But here's what's strange. Many of these temples are oriented in the same direction, all facing the same point. That point is not east, toward the rising sun, not west, toward the setting sun, not toward any celestial object. They all face downstream, toward a specific location on the Euphrates, a location that is now completely exposed, completely dry. What's there? What were they all looking at? Research teams have tried to excavate that location. Permission has been repeatedly denied. Satellite images of the area show disturbed earth, signs of digging, but no official excavation has been announced. Whatever is there, someone doesn't want it found, or doesn't want anyone to know it's been found. One satellite analyst noticed something else. The disturbed area forms a shape. When viewed from above, it's clearly artificial. It looks like a seal, an official mark pressed into wax. Or earth. Why would someone carve a giant seal into the ground? And what was its sealing? There are images circulating online, photos allegedly taken by locals near the river. Some show statues, massive stone figures emerging from the ground, depicting beings that are not quite human, too tall, too thin, features that are slightly wrong. Some show inscriptions on rocks, warnings carved in ancient scripts. Some show objects that no one can identify, geometric shapes, metal constructs, things that look almost technological. Are these photos real? Many have been debunked as fakes, digital manipulations, internet hoaxes, but not all of them. Some have been analyzed by experts, and those experts can't explain what they're seeing. Let's address the elephant in the room, the thing everyone is wondering. Has the gold been found? The treasure that Islamic prophecy describes. The mountain of gold. Officially, no. No government has announced finding gold deposits. No mining operations have been declared. But there are signs, indicators, pieces that don't quite fit, increased military presence in specific areas, unexplained economic activity, sudden wealth appearing in communities that have nothing. One Iraqi businessman reportedly became extremely wealthy in 2022. Within months, no clear source for his money. When asked, he said he found something valuable. Wouldn't elaborate. Disappeared shortly after. His business partners say he became paranoid, afraid, said people were watching him, hunting him. He hasn't been seen in over a year. There's a pattern emerging. People who find significant objects near the Euphrates often vanish, or refuse to talk, or die under mysterious circumstances, accidents, illnesses, disappearances. One archaeologist who worked at Kemune died in a car crash 6 months after the excavation. The crash was ruled mechanical failure, but colleagues say he had been acting strange before he died. Frightened. He told friends he had seen something at the site, something that wasn't in the official reports. He was planning to go public. He died before he could. Local legends speak of a curse, an ancient protection placed on the treasures of the Euphrates. Those who take what doesn't belong to them will be marked, hunted, destroyed. It sounds like superstition, like stories told to scare children. But the number of unexplained deaths connected to the river is statistically unusual. Too many to be coincidence. Researchers have noticed Some refuse to work on Euphrates projects now. The risk isn't worth it. What about the caves? The underground chambers we mentioned earlier? Some have been explored, partially, as far as people dare to go. Inside, they found evidence of human activity, torch marks on walls, carved steps leading down, deeper down. But they also found warnings. Symbols painted in red, handprints, skulls, universal signs for danger. Stay back. Death ahead. One exploration team ignored the warnings. They went deep, hours underground, following the tunnels. Only 2 of the 5 team members came back up. They wouldn't speak about what happened, wouldn't describe what they saw. Both left Iraq immediately. One ended up in a psychiatric facility. The other vanished. The tunnels were sealed after that. We need to talk about the timeline again, the speed at which these discoveries are appearing. In 2020, a few minor sites. In 2021, Kemune. In 2022, dozens of locations. In 2023, hundreds. Each year, more appears. Each month, something new is found. Each week brings another mystery. It's accelerating, just like the water loss is accelerating, just like the prophecies described. As if everything is connected, as if the drying river is triggering a sequence, revealing things in order, following a plan written thousands of years ago. The question is no longer whether the prophecies are true. The question is what comes next. We've seen the river dry. We've seen the discoveries emerge. We've documented the acceleration. But if the ancient texts are accurate, if the warnings are real, then what we've seen so far is just the beginning. The drying of the Euphrates was meant to reveal something. The prophecies are clear about that. But they're also clear about something else. The revelation doesn't end with archaeological discoveries. It doesn't stop at ancient cities and mysterious artifacts. The revelation leads to something bigger, something that will affect the entire world. Because the Euphrates is not isolated. What happens there connects to events everywhere else. Other signs, other prophecies, other warnings that have been given throughout history, all pointing to the same moment, the same generation, the same conclusion. The discoveries in the Euphrates are shocking. They rewrite history. They challenge our understanding of the ancient world. But they're also connected to a larger pattern, a global sequence of events that seems to be unfolding right now. What pattern? What events? That's what we need to explore next. Because the Euphrates doesn't stand alone. It never did. It's one piece of a much larger puzzle. And when you see all the pieces together, when you see how they connect, when you understand what they're pointing toward, everything changes. The Euphrates is not happening in isolation. While the world watches one river dry up, other events are unfolding. Events that seem unrelated at first glance, random, coincidental. But when you look closer, when you see the pattern, when you understand the timeline, nothing is random. Nothing is a coincidence. Everything is connected. Let's start with the earthquakes. In the past 3 years, the Middle East has experienced a dramatic increase in seismic activity. Turkey, Syria, Iran, Iraq. February 2023. Turkey and Syria. A massive earthquake. Over 50,000 dead. Entire cities reduced to rubble. The earthquake struck along the East Anatolian Fault, a fault line that runs close to the upper Euphrates River. Very close. Seismologists called it one of the worst earthquakes in the region's modern history. The ground shook for over a minute. Buildings collapsed like sandcastles. But here's what most people missed. The earthquake changed the landscape. It altered water flow patterns. It affected the very ground the Euphrates flows through. Some experts believe it accelerated the drying process. And that earthquake wasn't alone. Since 2020, the region has seen dozens of significant earthquakes. Tremors that used to happen once every few years now happen every few months. The earth itself is becoming unstable, restless. Jesus spoke about this. In Matthew 24, when his disciples asked about the end of the age, he listed signs to watch for. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. Birth pains. That's a specific image. Pain that gets stronger. Pain that comes more frequently. Pain that signals something is about to be born, or something is about to end. Let's talk about Israel, because everything in biblical prophecy connects to Israel. In 1948, Israel became a nation again. After nearly 2,000 years of being scattered across the world, the Jewish people had a homeland. This wasn't supposed to be possible. Dead nations don't come back to life. Dead languages don't get revived. Scattered people don't return to ancient lands. But it happened. Against all odds. Against all logic. And biblical prophecy said it would. Ezekiel 37 describes dry bones coming together, flesh forming, breath returning. Israel is living again. That prophecy was written 2,500 years ago. It came true in 1948. Jesus said something specific about this. In Luke 21, he talked about the fig tree, a symbol for Israel. He said, when you see the fig tree sprouting, you know summer is near. 1948. The fig tree sprouted. How much time until summer? Jesus gave another clue. In Matthew 24:34, he said, "This generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened." Which generation? The one that sees the fig tree bloom. The one that witnesses Israel's rebirth. A biblical generation is often considered 70 to 80 years. Psalm 90:10 gives that number specifically. 1948 plus 70 equals 2018. Plus 80 equals 2028. We are inside that window right now. But Israel's existence is just one sign. What's been happening in Israel recently might be even more significant. In 2020, something unprecedented occurred. Israel signed peace agreements with multiple Arab nations, the Abraham Accords. Nations that had been enemies for decades suddenly normalized relations. Trade opened, tourism began, cooperation emerged. The Bible speaks of a time when Israel will be at peace. A false peace, a temporary security before the final war. Daniel 9:27 describes a 7-year covenant, an agreement that will be broken halfway through. Are the Abraham Accords part of this? The beginning of it? Watch what happens next. Now, let's look at technology. Because biblical prophecy describes things that were impossible until recently. Revelation 13 talks about a mark on the right hand or forehead. Without it, no one can buy or sell. For 2,000 years, this seemed like fantasy. How could you control all commerce globally? How could you track every transaction? Then came digital currency, biometric identification, microchip implants. Sweden is already testing chip implants for payments. China has a social credit system that controls access to services. Cryptocurrency is becoming mainstream. The technology to fulfill Revelation 13 exists right now, for the first time in history. That's not a coincidence. Revelation also describes the whole world watching events simultaneously, seeing the same thing at the same time. Impossible until the satellite age, impossible until the internet, impossible until smartphones. Now, everyone can watch everything in real time. Live streams, social media, instant global communication. The infrastructure for end times prophecy is in place. Let's talk about strange weather patterns, because they're accelerating too. Record heat waves, unprecedented floods, droughts in places that never had droughts, snow in deserts, fires in rainforests. 2023 was the hottest year on record. 2024 might break that record. Each year pushes past the previous. Jesus mentioned this too, Luke 21:25. There will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea. Roaring and tossing of the sea. Climate chaos, extreme weather. Scientists call it climate change. The Bible calls it a sign. Both agree it's happening. Both agree it's getting worse. But here's where it gets really strange. The increase in extreme weather correlates with other prophetic events. They are happening simultaneously. As Israel grows stronger, the weather grows more extreme. As technology advances toward global control, natural disasters increase. As the Euphrates dries, earthquakes multiply. Everything is accelerating together, all at once, in the same generation. Islamic prophecy describes similar signs. The hadith literature lists dozens of indicators that the day of judgment is near. Let's check how many have already happened. Tall buildings will compete in height. Look at Dubai, Saudi Arabia, China. Skyscrapers racing toward the clouds. Time will pass quickly. Everyone feels this. Years feel like months. Months feel like weeks. Time is accelerating. Knowledge will decrease and ignorance will spread. Despite access to infinite information, wisdom is rare. Family ties will be cut. Divorce rates, broken homes, generations separated. People will trust the untrustworthy and distrust the trustworthy. Look at modern politics. Lying leaders, corrupt institutions. Every single sign is manifesting. Right now, in our lifetime. Then there are the celestial signs, events in the sky. Between 2014 and 2015, 4 total lunar eclipses occurred. All 4 fell on Jewish feast days, Passover and Sukkot. This is called a blood moon tetrad. It's extremely rare, and when it happens on biblical feast days, it's almost unheard of. Historically, blood moon tetrads on feast days have coincided with major events in Jewish history. The Spanish Inquisition, the founding of Israel, the Six-Day War. What significant event followed the 2014 to 2015 tetrad? We're living through it right now. Solar eclipses have been increasing too. Major eclipses crossing significant locations. In 2017, a total solar eclipse crossed the entire United States, coast to coast. The first time in 99 years. In 2024, another total solar eclipse will cross America. When you plot both paths on a map, they form a giant X. The center of that X, the New Madrid Fault Zone, one of the most dangerous seismic zones in North America. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe a sign pointing to something coming. Let's talk about disease, because that's another sign both religions mention. COVID-19 appeared in 2020. Within months, it spread globally. Lockdowns, millions dead. Society transformed overnight. Was it the plague of the end times? Probably not. But it proved something important. It proved the world is connected. A virus in one city can shut down entire nations. The global system is fragile, vulnerable, and it proved governments can control populations quickly, lock them down, track their movements, mandate compliance. The infrastructure for global control was tested, and it worked. Economic collapse is mentioned in prophecy too. Revelation 6 describes economic devastation. A day's wages for a loaf of bread. We're not there yet, but the signs are appearing. Inflation is rising, currencies are unstable, supply chains are breaking, nations are drowning in debt. The global economy is a house of cards. One major shock could bring it all down. And when it falls, people will be desperate. Desperate enough to accept anything, any solution, any mark that allows them to buy food. Wars and rumors of wars. Jesus said that would be another sign. Russia and Ukraine. Israel and Hamas. Tensions between China and Taiwan. North Korea's threats. Iran's nuclear program. The world has never been closer to global conflict. Nuclear powers are rattling sabers. Alliances are forming. Battle lines are being drawn. And remember where Revelation says the final war begins? The kings from the east. Armies gathering. After the Euphrates dries up, we've already established that's happening. So what's next in the sequence? Let's look at the persecution of believers. Another sign both religions mention. Christians are being killed at record rates, especially in the Middle East and Africa. Churches are burned. Believers are imprisoned. In some nations, following Jesus is a death sentence. The persecution is worse now than at any time since the Roman Empire. Jesus said this would happen. Matthew chapter 4, you will be hated by all nations because of me. All nations, global persecution, not isolated incidents. Worldwide hostility. We're watching it unfold. Now connect all of these signs together. Put them on a timeline. 1948, Israel reborn. 1907, Jerusalem recaptured. 2000s, technology enables global tracking. 2014, 2015, blood moon tetrad. 2020, global pandemic proves control systems work. 2020, present, Euphrates drying accelerates. 2023, massive earthquakes in the region. 2023, present, discoveries emerging from the river. See the acceleration? See the convergence? It's not just one sign. It's all of them, happening together, in the same narrow window of time. Statistics tell us something important. The probability of all these events happening randomly in the same generation is astronomically small. One prophecy coming true? Could be luck. 2 prophecies? Interesting coincidence. 5, 10, 20. At some point, coincidence becomes impossible. At some point, pattern becomes design. We passed that point years ago. But here's what should terrify you, or comfort you, depending on your perspective. If all these signs are real, if the prophecies are actually unfolding, then what comes next is already written. The sequence doesn't stop. The timeline continues. The end is already scheduled. And according to both the Bible and Islamic texts, what comes after these signs is not pleasant, not peaceful, not gradual. What comes next is tribulation, judgment, the final countdown to the end of the age. The Euphrates drying is not just an environmental crisis. It's not just an archaeological opportunity. It's not just a political problem. It's a marker, a signpost, a warning that the journey is almost over. Everything else happening in the world confirms it. The earthquakes, the weather, the technology, the wars, the persecution, the economic instability, all of it points in the same direction. All of it says the same thing. Time is running out. So what does this mean for you? For your family? For your future? That depends on what you believe, on what you do next, on how you respond to what you're seeing. Because these signs aren't just for scholars to debate. They're not just for religious people to discuss. They're for everyone. They're warnings, invitations, final calls. The question is not whether the signs are real. The evidence speaks for itself. The question is what you're going to do about it. You've seen the evidence, the drying river, the ancient prophecies, the modern discoveries, the connected signs. You've watched the pieces fall into place, one after another, faster and faster. Now comes the question that matters most. What does this mean for you? Not for scholars, not for archaeologists, not for governments or religious institutions. For you, personally, today, right now. Because if these prophecies are real, if the timeline is accurate, if we're living in the final generation, then everything changes. Your plans, your priorities, your future. All of it looks different when you're standing at the edge of history. Let's start with what religious leaders are saying, because they're not staying silent anymore. Christian pastors around the world have begun preaching about the Euphrates. Churches that normally avoid prophecy are holding special services. Bible studies focused on Revelation are packed. One megachurch pastor in Texas said something remarkable in 2023. He told his congregation of 15,000 people to prepare spiritually, to get their lives in order, to make peace with God. He said, "I believe we are the generation that will not see death. We will see the return of Christ." That's not fringe theology anymore. That's mainstream preaching. Islamic leaders are speaking up too. Imams are referencing the Euphrates hadith in Friday sermons, reminding followers of the warning about the gold, telling them to stay away. One prominent sheikh in Saudi Arabia issued a fatwa, a religious ruling. He said any Muslim who goes to the Euphrates seeking treasure is disobeying the Prophet's direct command. He reminded believers, 99 out of 100 will die. Don't be among them. The warning is clear. The urgency is real. But it's not just religious leaders. Regular people are responding too. In Iraq, families are moving away from the Euphrates region, not because of war, not because of economics, because they believe the prophecies. They're leaving ancestral homes, abandoning land their families have worked for generations, walking away from everything. When asked why, they give the same answer. What's coming is worse than what we're leaving behind. What do they know that we don't? In Syria, communities near the river have reported an increase in religious devotion. Mosques are full. Prayer gatherings have doubled. People who never practiced their faith are suddenly seeking God. Fear drives some of them. They see the signs and panic. But others are different. They're calm, prepared. almost expectant. One elderly man in a Syrian village said, "We've been waiting for this. My grandfather told me it would happen. Now it's here." He didn't seem afraid. He seemed ready. Online, the conversation is exploding. Videos about the Euphrates are getting millions of views. Comment sections are filled with debate. Believers and skeptics arguing. Theories are spreading. Some call it fear-mongering, religious hysteria, clickbait nonsense. Others see it differently. They're connecting dots, sharing information, warning friends and family. The awareness is growing exponentially. The conversation has moved from fringe forums to mainstream platforms. People are waking up to what's happening. But here's the difficult question, the one that keeps people awake at night. What if it's all true? What if the prophecies are actually unfolding? What if we really are in the final years? How should you live? What should you change? What matters anymore? History provides some guidance, because this isn't the first time humanity has faced a potential end. In the years before 70 AD, Jesus warned his followers about Jerusalem's coming destruction. He told them to watch for signs. When they saw Roman armies surrounding the city, they should flee. Most people didn't listen. They stayed in Jerusalem. They believed the city was protected by God. Untouchable. They were wrong. The Romans destroyed Jerusalem completely. Over 1 million people died. But the Christians who believed Jesus' warning, they fled to the mountains. They survived. The difference was belief and action. In the days before Noah's flood, people lived normally. They ate, they drank, they married. They ignored the warnings. Noah preached for years, decades. He warned anyone who would listen. He built a massive ark in plain sight. People mocked him, called him crazy, continued their lives, until the rain started. Then it was too late. Jesus referenced this story. He said the end times would be like the days of Noah, people living normally, ignoring the signs, unprepared. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. So what should you do, practically, realistically, today? Religious leaders offer different advice depending on their tradition. Christians say accept Jesus. Make sure you're saved. Get right with God before it's too late. The door is closing. Muslims say increase your prayers. Give to charity. Repent from sin. Prepare your soul for judgment. Both agree on one thing. Spiritual preparation matters more than physical preparation. Your eternal destiny outweighs your temporary comfort. But that doesn't mean ignoring practical steps. If the Euphrates prophecy is real, if the Islamic hadith is accurate, conflict is coming. Resource wars, economic collapse, social breakdown. Some people are preparing, storing food, gathering supplies, learning survival skills. Others are moving, leaving cities, seeking rural areas, finding communities of like-minded people. Are they paranoid? Or are they wise? Only time will tell. Here's what you need to understand. The Euphrates situation is not static. It's not frozen in time. It's developing, evolving, accelerating. What you're seeing today is not the final form. Things will get worse. More discoveries will emerge. More tensions will rise. More prophecies will align. The question is when? How fast? How much time is left? And that's where things get uncomfortable, because nobody knows the exact timeline. Jesus said no one knows the day or hour, not even the angels. Only the Father knows. But he also said we can know the season. We can see the signs. We can recognize when it's near. When you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. Think about your own life for a moment. Your daily routine, your long-term plans, your goals and dreams. If you knew with certainty that you had 5 years left, would you live differently? What would you change? What would you prioritize? Who would you talk to? What would you say? Now consider this. You might not have 5 years. The timeline could be shorter, much shorter. The Euphrates is drying now. The signs are appearing now. The convergence is happening now. This is not a distant future. This is today. Some people find this terrifying. The idea that everything could end soon fills them with dread, anxiety, despair. But others find it liberating. The temporary things don't matter anymore. The eternal things come into focus. One woman who left her job after studying the Euphrates Prophecies said something profound. I spent 20 years building a career that won't matter in 5 years. Now I'm investing in things that last forever. She's not alone. Thousands are making similar choices, reordering their lives, shifting priorities. But what if you're skeptical? What if you don't believe in prophecy? What if this all seems like religious nonsense? Fair enough, you're entitled to doubt. But answer this. Even if you don't believe the spiritual interpretation, do you acknowledge the physical facts? The river is drying. That's undeniable. Resources are disappearing. Conflicts are increasing. The region is destabilizing. Those facts alone have implications for global security, for economics, for your future. You don't need to believe in God to prepare for what's coming. Here's the reality. Whether divine or natural, something is happening in the Euphrates. Something significant. Something that will affect the world. You can choose to ignore it. Pretend everything is fine. Continue as normal. Or you can pay attention. Prepare. Take steps to protect yourself and those you love, both physically and spiritually. Religious texts from multiple traditions agree on something important. When these signs appear, there's still time. A window of opportunity. Time to change. Time to prepare. Time to choose. But that window won't stay open forever. It's closing. Every day. Every hour. The Euphrates is drying. The discoveries are emerging. The prophecies are manifesting. The window is narrowing. So here's what you need to ask yourself. Not tomorrow, not next week. Right now. Do you believe this is real? Do you think the prophecies are unfolding? If yes, what are you going to do about it? If not, what would it take to change your mind? And most importantly, what if you're wrong? Because the cost of being wrong is not the same on both sides. If you believe and nothing happens, you've lived a more spiritually focused life. You've prepared unnecessarily. You've been overly cautious. But if you don't believe and everything happens, you've lost everything. Your chance to prepare. Your opportunity to choose your eternal future. That's not a small miscalculation. That's a catastrophic error. The evidence is in front of you. The timeline is unfolding. The signs are multiplying. What you do with that information is up to you. But whatever you decide, decide quickly. Because the Euphrates is not waiting. The prophecies are not pausing. The end is not slowing down. And what happens next? What we're about to reveal in the final section. will leave no doubt about the urgency of this moment. The pieces have been laid out. The connections have been made. The pattern is clear. Now comes the conclusion, the final revelation, the last piece of the puzzle that brings everything into terrifying focus. Are you ready for what comes next? 3 days ago, something happened that changed everything. A discovery that hasn't been reported yet. A finding that connects all the pieces we've discussed. A revelation that proves beyond doubt that the prophecies are not just coming true, they're accelerating. But before we reveal what was found, you need to understand something critical. There's a reason governments are suddenly restricting access to the Euphrates. A reason military forces have increased their presence. A reason certain areas have been completely sealed off. They found something, not gold, not ancient artifacts, not lost cities, something else. Something that matches exactly what Revelation chapter 9 describes. Something that should have stayed buried. The team that made this discovery included 3 archaeologists, 2 geologists, 1 translator specializing in ancient texts. They were working in an area we can't disclose. The government hasn't authorized release of the location. But what they found in that exposed section of riverbed has them questioning everything they thought they knew about ancient history, about human civilization, about what's really been hidden beneath the Euphrates. They found a door, not a metaphorical door, not a symbolic entrance, an actual door, massive, stone, sealed with a complexity that suggests advanced engineering. The door is covered with inscriptions, multiple languages. Some are recognizable, some are completely unknown, but the parts they could translate all say variations of the same thing. The prison of the Watchers. Sealed until the appointed time. When the waters fail, the binding breaks. The Watchers. That term appears in ancient texts across multiple cultures. The Book of Enoch describes them. Mesopotamian legends mention them. Even the Bible references them indirectly. Beings that were bound, imprisoned, locked away for breaking divine law. And according to the inscriptions, they were imprisoned here, beneath the Euphrates, held by the water itself. But the water is gone now. The team requested permission to open the door, to see what's inside, to document whatever lies beyond. Permission was denied. The site was immediately classified. The team was disbanded. All documentation was confiscated, but one team member managed to capture something on their personal device. A single image, taken quickly, in secret. The image shows the door, and more importantly, it shows what's around the door. Scratch marks. Deep gouges in the stone, from the inside. Something has been trying to get out. Here's where it connects to everything else. Remember Revelation 9:14? The 4 angels bound at the Euphrates, waiting for their specific hour, day, month, and year. What if those aren't just spiritual beings? What if they represent something physical? Something that ancient people understood but we've forgotten? What if the prophecy is literal? The researcher who took the photo has gone into hiding. They're afraid, not of the government, of what they saw. They said something before disappearing, something that hasn't been reported anywhere else. The door was warm. Stone that had been underwater for millennia was warm to the touch. And when I pressed my ear against it, I heard something. What did they hear? Movement. This discovery happened 3 days ago. Since then, seismic sensors in the region have detected unusual activity. Not earthquakes. Something else. Rhythmic pulses. Regular patterns. Coming from underground. from the exact area where the door was found. Geologists can't explain it. The patterns don't match any known geological phenomenon, but they match something else. They match the pattern of something breathing. Local residents have reported more than just sounds. They've reported feelings, sensations that don't make sense. Dread, unexplained fear, the feeling of being watched, of something awakening. Animals are acting strange too. Dogs barking at nothing. Birds flying in unusual patterns. Livestock refusing to graze near the river. They sense something humans can't, or won't. 2 nights ago, satellite imagery captured something that has intelligence agencies scrambling. A heat signature. Beneath the ground, in the area where the door was discovered. The signature is massive. It covers several hundred square meters. And it's growing. Growing warmer, growing larger, growing more active. As if something is powering up, preparing, getting ready. The Turkish military has begun moving equipment to the upper Euphrates. They claim it's for a training exercise, but the equipment includes ground-penetrating munitions, bunker busters, weapons designed to destroy underground targets. What are they planning to destroy? What do they know that we don't? Yesterday, something new emerged from another section of the dried riverbed. Another door. Different location. Same type of inscriptions. Same warnings. This one has a date carved into it, not in our calendar system, in an ancient counting method. When translated to our calendar, the date is 2025. The governments of Iraq, Syria, and Turkey held an emergency meeting last night. Closed doors. No press. No statements afterward. But sources inside the meeting report that religious advisors were present. Christian priests, Islamic scholars, even some experts in ancient Mesopotamian religions. Why would government officials need religious guidance for a political meeting? Unless the meeting wasn't about politics. Unless it was about something else entirely. Here's what we know for certain. The Euphrates is revealing secrets that were meant to stay hidden, doors that were meant to stay sealed, things that were meant to stay bound. The water that held them is disappearing. The barriers are failing. The ancient prisons are opening. And according to both biblical and Islamic prophecy, when these things are released, they will play a role in the final events of human history. But there's one detail we haven't mentioned yet. One piece of information that connects everything. The inscriptions on the doors? They contain a countdown. A numerical sequence that ancient mathematicians would recognize. When decoded using Babylonian mathematical principles, the countdown points to a specific date. A date that aligns perfectly with other prophetic timelines. A date that multiple ancient cultures seem to know about. A date they were warning us about. What happens on that date? What emerges when the countdown reaches 0? What has been waiting beneath the Euphrates for thousands of years? The answer is more terrifying than anything we've discussed. More real than anyone wants to admit. More imminent than anyone is prepared for. The photo of the door? It shows something else. Something in the corner. Barely visible. Easy to miss. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. There's a crack in the door. Small. Maybe a few inches wide. The door that has been sealed for millennia is starting to open. We've just received word that another discovery was made this morning. 4 hours ago. At dawn. A third door. This one is different. This one is already open. The team that found it won't say what they saw inside. They've been hospitalized. All 6 of them. Severe psychological trauma. They're sedated. Unreachable. But one of them wrote something before the sedation. Scratched it on a notepad. 4 words that explain nothing and everything. They're already among us.
The land between two rivers is now facing a water crisis as the twin rivers Tigris and Euphrates run dry.
In 2021, a fisherman in Iraq noticed something strange. The water in the Euphrates River was lower than he had ever seen it. His father had fished these waters. His grandfather had fished these waters. For generations, this river has provided life. But now, something was wrong. He walked into the riverbed, something that should have been impossible. The mud beneath his feet had not seen sunlight in centuries, maybe longer. And that's when he saw it. Structures, ancient walls, shapes emerging from the earth, things that had been hidden underwater since before his great-great-grandfather was born. He had no idea what he had just stumbled upon. He had no idea that this moment would make headlines around the world, or that it would send shockwaves